she is, finally.
Hi, tick tock, tick tock. I wanted you guys, to have a chance to, chit chat about me before I got burning terribly. So, how is everybody tonight?
Good.
We're good. Good. Yep. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Hey, Hewley.
Yeah, good to see you.
How are you too? We have all kinds of exciting stuff to report on tonight. And as usual, it's in the form of a slideshow. So why don't we go ahead and get going? I will see if we can get a share here and get this show on the road. The beginning. All right, we're just going to skip through this because, we're going to resume where we left off last week with the Buckeye bad guy.
Ladies and gentlemen,
as you might
the story
recall,
you're about to see is true.
Down at
the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
That's enough of that. The Ohio Buckeye down in Batavia was getting literally ripped to shreds. And we wrote it in the form of a mystery of who or what might possibly be doing this to this poor tree. And I gotta say, I heard from a lot of people, the newspaper form of the Good Natured column is now being distributed all over the place thanks to Shaw Media. And I heard from a gentleman, actually people up near the Wisconsin border, people out near the Mississippi River, people around Joliet, they all weighed in with some very interesting, and then people around here too, weighed in with some interesting suspects. A couple of people made a pretty solid case for this character here. This you might recognize is an American porcupine. They do chew heavily on trees in their range, and while their range does come close to Illinois, and I've had actually a few people over the years swear up and down that they've seen porcupines in trees, but none of those cases were documented, and I just don't think that porcupines come this far south. A couple other people made pretty solid cases for this guy here. This is the American woodchuck, also known as a groundhog. And they do climb trees. In fact, I think some of the people who thought they might be seeing porcupines in trees were actually seeing woodchucks in trees. Because the other name for these guys is groundhog, I think we associate them with staying on the ground most of the year. They're in this pretty chunky form, but they do climb, and they can climb pretty well. It's a great way for them to escape predators. In fact, this picture was taken by my friend Nikki Dallin, and you can see here, the woodchuck actually was chewing on some wood. I don't know if it chucked it later or not, but we're gonna stop all of those opinions right now because it was neither a porcupine or a woodchuck. Let's go back to the scene here on Sunday, November 29th. And Sarah, I will give you credit once again for happening upon the scene just as the perpetrator was perpetrating. Here it is. This is a fox squirrel. And it, as you very astutely noticed, Sarah, it's not chewing on the outer bark or the inner bark, but it is specifically going for the pith of the Ohio Buckeye. In fact, you sent me more pictures last Friday when you were there again, and you can see how the damage has progressed. There's really nothing left, these branches here. And the fox squirrel was there again. So as it turns out, there is a very strong relationship between the fox squirrel and the Ohio Buckeye. And in the column that I wrote last Thursday, we talked a little bit about it. This is the chart that was displayed in this write-up that appeared in 1976 in a publication called the American Midland Naturalist. There were three individuals associated with the University of Illinois and the Illinois Natural History Survey, and I think one of the guys actually worked for the Illinois Geologic Survey. But they made these observations in a woodland area not too far from the U of I campus. It's called Trelease Woods. And they noticed that fox squirrels were feeding on Ohio buckeye and specifically the pith. And when they analyzed the pith of those trees, they found that they were actually quite sugary. This is the chart that shows what their analysis found. And you can see that the sugar maple actually has a slightly higher percentage of sugar than the Ohio buckeye. But when you look at these types of sugars, you'll see this one here that's called raffinose. Look at how much raffinose was contained in the pith of the buckeye. Way more than any of the other trees that were growing in those woods. This raffinose is super sweet. And Sarah and I did taste it when we went to investigate over that Thanksgiving weekend, and I wouldn't say it's sugary, you know, as we humans are used to tasting sugars. You know, the taste, and I'll throw out the same disclaimer I did before. And Sarah, I know you want to make sure as a physician that we make this clear. The Ohio buckeye is loaded with toxins, but the pith itself, I don't know if those toxins aren't present there, or if this isn't the right time of year to be effective, you know, if they're not, you know, present in high quantities at this time of the year. But neither one of us suffered any ill effects from our tasting. But that doesn't mean we should all go out and taste buckeyes, because they do have a considerable number of toxins to protect all the bounty that they hold for themselves, which is namely their seeds, and apparently this sugary pith. But the raffinose appears to be what the fox squirrels are going after, and it doesn't seem like it's that common of a behavior. In the Trelease Woods fox squirrels, it was noted that they were feeding on pith there, but in another woodland close by, they had a very similar composition, but more composition species-wise, but more in the way of oak trees. The fox squirrels there weren't feeding on the buckeyes, and the assumption or the theory is that they didn't have to eat the pith of the buckeye because there was plenty of acorns for them to be feeding on there. Now, something else Sarah found out was that the apartment building that's right next to where these Ohio buckeyes are growing in downtown Batavia, is that they have somewhat recently put in a ban of bird feeders, because they were finding they were getting mice in the building, they were getting snakes in the building. That to me sounds like the perfect reason to keep putting bird feeders out. If you're getting snakes in your building, well, again, that's my dream, not theirs. But we're wondering if maybe the fox squirrels were taking advantage of the bird seed before, and since that's not there anymore, they're looking at alternate food sources. Now, why it's only fox squirrels and not gray squirrels, don't know. I tried to find other articles referring to this behavior, and everything I could find on the internet actually just referred to this article. So it does seem to be a somewhat unusual behavior, and it's still going on. Although, as Sarah has noted, there are 2 Ohio buckeyes growing at the Batavia Wildflower Sanctuary, and most of the activity is concentrated on this one tree. The other tree is, I don't know, 20, 30 feet away, something like that. And it's got a little bit of nibbling, right, Sarah, but not a whole lot. So I don't know if the trees vary from year to year and how much sugar they concentrate in the pith. If one tree is maybe a little bit farther along in its preparations for winter, sequestering the sugars. I don't know, but this is why that was happening. And I think it's so interesting. I actually got an email from a gentleman out in Campton Hills who said that he has had his Ohio Buckeye chewed on as well, and he didn't know exactly why, but he's thinking maybe he wasn't lucky enough to catch his perpetrator, but now he's thinking that maybe we helped him solve his mystery as well. So kind of cool, kind of neat. Now, we're gonna put on a different hat now, and we're going to move into the arena of wildlife sign identification. We've got a couple of little exercises here. Actually, one is for tracking and the other one is for birding. So last week, I was coming here to the office at 213 Walnut Street in downtown St. Charles, and I looked in the dirt out in front. I thought, that looks like a deer track. Let's look at it without the circle. Can you see the outline here? Deer are, they've got the two toes down here, and then they've also got a couple of kind of dew claws that only show if there's really deep mud or deep snow, but this sure looks like a deer track to me. See where there's a space here. Here's one toe, here's the other toe. For comparison, here's a deer track in snow. Here's one toe, and here's the other toe. And here's back in the day when I had Blistex Spa Effects. Haven't used that in several years, but that was my 2 9/16 inch lip balm from that particular era of lip balms. But I don't know, this sure looked like a deer track to me. I walked along the street and I looked for signs of browsing. We talked about this a week or two ago, how deer, when they feed, they don't bite neatly because they don't have any top incisors. They only have bottom ones. So when they bite it at plant material, they kind of have to tear it off. So they leave a pretty characteristic kind of shredding effect on the end of the twig or grass or whatever it is that they're munching on. So I walked over next door here to the Baker building, and they have a lot of things that aren't really that tasty, boxwood and stuff like that, but where I could find vegetation that would look like it might be tasty, it didn't look as though it was touched. Where the footprint was out here in front of our office building, there's not really anything growing either, but there are, that is right beneath a bur oak tree, and deer, of course, do eat acorns. So I don't know if there was a deer there and it was kind of nosing around. Now, this is the habitat that we're talking about. This is where my office is here in this house on the south side of Walnut Street. This is the bur oak tree. The track was right here by our Baker Building Marketing Annex sign that's out in front. There's a little bit of soil right around the front. I also walked over to the funeral home here. This is Moss, formerly Norris Funeral Home. And I looked to see, they had a lot of hostas, but they cut them all down for the winter. So again, the idea of deer in downtown St. Charles isn't completely unheard of. Susie, I remember you saying that, yes, you've had deer, you've seen deer
right.
walking around late at night.
There's a lot on at the cemetery on 25.
Okay.
By the Bethlehem Lutheran.
Uh-huh.
And I've also seen them over at that old cemetery on 7th.
Down. Oh, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's you know, just walking distance. I know I've seen well, actually it was a dead muskrat, but it was a muskrat on Main Street on the bridge. So muskrats stroll around downtown, and I know I tried to find reference online. I probably, should have called the library to see if they could look this up on microfiche, but I know that at one time, maybe 20 to 25 years ago, there was a deer in what was then called the Proud Fox Gallery in St. Charles. And I know over in Geneva, a deer got trapped in the beer garden behind what's now Stockholm's. And I don't know if it was Stockholm's then or Dad's place, but they do come around. And then I've been looking ever since for more sign of deer, haven't seen any. But it did remind me of this photo too. This was taken by Laura. She was a photographer for a long time with the Daily Herald. She's off on her own now doing art projects and things like that. But she snapped this photo of a beaver in downtown Charles. This is Route 31. Carroll Tower is here to the south. Salerno's is over here to the north. And this beaver was actually wandering amongst the bars over on Main Street and then over by the filling station and stuff on 3rd Street. Well, somebody called the police and the police gave it an escort back across 31 and hopefully to safety there in the river. So it's a time of year. Now this was summertime, but deer, they're wrapping up their breeding season. They're starting now to get back into their little family groups and small herds. And anyway, I'm just going to keep my eye open a little bit more. And maybe you will too when you're walking around downtown St. Charles, Geneva, and look more closely in the mud. And then hopefully we'll get some snow sometime soon. That would make it really easy to track their behaviors. So now this other picture here, we're going to test our birding skills. This came by way of Facebook Messenger. I got a little note. Please help us identify these. Thank you so much for your help. I've stared at this thing, I don't know how many different times. I thought, well, the more eyes, the better. I think I have one bird identified, but there's others too. Let's take a look at this video footage here. So this kind of illustrates a couple of things about birding. When the lighting isn't good, colors don't come through very well. The one thing I do know is this is a pan from the hospital. I recognize that right off the bat. This also underscores the importance of water. Water in its liquid form, especially now as we get into the colder days of winter, a lot of ice is going to form. It's going to make that water inaccessible. And birds don't need water just for drinking, although they definitely need water to survive inside their bodies, but they also need it to keep their feathers in shape too. Now, I'm going to stop it a couple of times. Boy, technology. Let me see if I can stop it at the right place this time. No, it's, you know what? It's not going to let me stop it. This is, I was playing it back and forth for myself. No, I guess it perceives my hitting the pause button is advancing to the next slide. Well, I saw a female house sparrow in there. This bird that just jumped in and jumped back out, it's got some white underneath the wings. That was kind of throwing me. Birders in the crowd, does anybody have any guesses? If there's anything other than see the line and the cap on the female house sparrow, but anybody else have any guesses as to what those birds are? And if you don't want to talk, you can reply in the chat too. this is the kind of thing that'll tie up a half hour of my day as I'm looking and playing and replaying it. This family lives out in Caneville. They're the ones that have been observing some what looks to be badger activity too. Large holes, multiple holes were appearing near their lot line, which borders a farm field. So they're great nature observers, and they actually are pretty good with a lot of their ID. They also sent this photo. This one's a lot easier. You've got a glimpse of it now a couple of times, but here's a big old bald eagle. But what was interesting was that a Cooper's hawk flew in and sat below it, and there was really no interaction between the two. They were wondering if the Cooper's hawk was kind of using the bald eagle for protection, or if maybe the Cooper's hawk was following the bald eagle. There are not very many, but there are a few references of Cooper's hawks scavenging on carcasses where bald eagles are also scavenging. So it could be this Cooper's hawk was taking a day off from eating little birds and bird baths and following its big cousin around. But anyway, did anybody want to chime in with thoughts on those birds in the bird bath? Or if not, we'll watch it one more time. Some more. What threw me, that bird, I don't know, I thought it had kind of a, see that white underneath the wing? That was kind of throwing me too. Anyway, all in a day's work. I told her to, even if she doesn't know what's taking a bath there, to definitely keep supplying that water because the birds definitely need it this time of year. So let's move on. Let's completely switch gears. This story, I thought a lot about it over this past weekend. There's some interesting news about local bison. And of course, when we think about local bison, your mind probably goes to Fermilab because that's the only bison we have locally. And no, they're not wild. They're part of a managed herd, and they're kind of a display feature there that reminds people of the prairie heritage that we have in this area. But this story goes way back. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a gentleman named William Hornaday. He spent some time as a taxidermist at what was then called the U.S. National Museum, now known as the Smithsonian. And he was one of the first, and actually he's credited with being the taxidermist who began the movement of displaying animals in a natural setting. So taxiderming, making taxidermy mounts that would make the animals appear as they would as if you were viewing them in nature. Prior to that, there was certainly a lot of taxidermy being done, but the animals were not always displayed, you know, with the accompanying elements of their natural environment. So Mr. Hornaday was also a conservationist at a time when conservation wasn't really a thing. Teddy Roosevelt, they collaborated a little bit later when TR was president and enacted a lot of the conservation laws that we have today. But anyway, Mr. Hornaday was greatly bothered by what was going on with the American bison. And he was pretty much convinced that they were going to be going extinct in his lifetime. This is a photo, none of those gentlemen there are Mr. Hornaday. This is just giving you an idea of the extent of the slaughter of these animals. Those are all bison skulls. This is a little bit further west. And so Mr. Hornaday in his work at the Smithsonian felt that it was imperative that they get a display of American bison so that future generations would be able to see this animal that was no longer around. So he made some contacts with some ranchers out west, and he learned of a small group. He estimated it was about 30 bison. And he made plans to go out there. Actually, I guess he did go out in the late spring, early summer to see them. And he realized that that wasn't the right time to take any animals to be mounted as specimens, because they were sloughing off their winter coats and growing their summer coats, and they were just kind of raggedy looking. And most of the time when you see a taxidermy mount, it's of a mammal, it's displaying its winter pelt, because that's when the fur is the thickest and the fullest. So he made plans to go back then in, I believe it was November. This was in 1886. And they actually shot all the bison that they found, about 25. And it was a crucial decision on his part, because here he was convinced that this was the last of this magnificent animal, and that if he didn't take them and preserve them, that they would be lost to time, and that there wouldn't be, because there really weren't any other efforts going on. These piles of skulls were the way people were keeping their memories of the bison. So he took these animals, and then from the 25 or so that he shot, he created a display of 6 bison for the Smithsonian. And then the other taxidermy mounts kind of went, there was a big taxidermy outfit also out east called Ward Taxidermy. He had actually worked for them prior to working at the Smithsonian. These animals were on display for several decades. They actually got pared down to these 3. And again, the other ones were distributed to other learning institutions and places that would have taxidermy animals on display. Well, in, I don't know if it was 1950 or the early 1950s, the Smithsonian decided they were going to move away from these cases. You can see these wood-trimmed glass cases. This was a very common way of displaying animals in the earlier part of the 20th century. In fact, I went to University of Illinois, and this picture reminds me of the displays that were in the Natural History Building. Old mounts displayed behind glass. Well, as the Smithsonian started to modernize, they decided rather than having all these cases out on the floor, they wanted to put the displays into the walls and give a kind of a sleeker look, open up the floor space. So they dismantled this display. And as they were taking these bison down, they actually found a note from Mr. Hornaday that went something to the effect of, "Hello, museum curators of the future. I'm sure by now you've developed better techniques for mounting animals. I did the best I could with what I had at this time, but I am begging you, please don't destroy these animals. They still have value. These were the last of the wild bison that were existing here in the United States in the 1880s. So they still took the animals down, and the Smithsonian moved on to other things, and the story of the bison kind of, fell away from people's eyes, people's awareness, people's consciousness. Well, let's take a few steps forward to the early 2000s. So this is an article that was in the Chicago Tribune, and it regards the bison that were at the Tecowitha Woods Nature Center, which was actually the Arlene Shoemaker Nature Center. Some of you might remember that nature center up at Tech. It was dismantled and torn down. It was around 2012 or so when they made their move over to Creek Bend Nature Center, where the Nature Center exists today. But in fact, it's funny, I was an intern at the Nature Center at Tekakwitha Woods, and one of my jobs as the intern was to get the shop vac out and vacuum the 3 bison that were on a display there. There was mouse poop that would accumulate in the mane of the largest bison there. And these things were not in glass. They were just kind of in a corner with a display of a wigwam that an Eagle Scout had made. So, they were exposed to all, kinds of elements, different varying humidities and lighting and people touching them and everything. Well, anyway, the Forest Preserve District received a grant from IDNR, and they created just a display that was first at Tekakwitha and now is at Creek Bend. But look at this. The bison had originally belonged to Colonel Fabian, and if you have heard stories about Colonel Fabian, that he liked to collect unusual objects. Probably the most obvious display of his affection for oddities is that the windmill that's on Route 25 and the east side of the Fabian Forest Preserve. So he bought that. It was dismantled and in boxcars over in I think it was Elmhurst, and he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll buy it." So he heard about these bison, and so local lore said that he got them from his friend Marshall Field and paid $80 for the bull, $40 for the cow, $20 for the calf. What actually happened was it wasn't Marshall Field, but it was the Field Museum. And it says that they had acquired them from Ward's natural science establishment. That's that taxidermy firm where Hornaday had worked prior to working at the Smithsonian. And that they had also been displayed at the Chicago Columbian Exposition. So check this at the bottom here of this article. The animals are determined to have been prepared by the 19th century naturalist and pioneering taxidermist William P. Hornaday. So are the bison that are now at Creek Bend? Now this is the cow, and then I didn't do a very good job of getting the calf in the picture, but here's the cow, and here's the calf, and here's the bull. These are on display. I think the Forest Preserve District recently got another grant from the state, and these animals are going to remain in these cases, but they are going to, the whole prairie exhibit is going to get an upgrade. So these will be integrated into a brand new exhibit that I believe is due to get done in 2 years. So kind of cool that we're going to be getting even more exposure in that new exhibit. But here is a Tribune article from 2003 saying that these are Hornaday bison. We've got Barb McKittrick, who's the manager at Creek Bend. She's actually going through the documentation to see, could these possibly have been part of those 25 bison that were shot in 1886 in Montana. Another local gentleman, Paul Niesler, he's a member of Kane County Audubon. He's kind of hot on this story as well. In fact, this all came from Paul. He's doing research as well and is working with the taxidermist at the Field Museum to see if there's any way at all they can determine if these are some of those original wild Montana bison, of which there's really not. We've got herds of bison in Yellowstone. We've got herds of bison in Custer State Park in South Dakota. There's bison now out at Medellin and out at the Chusa grasslands here in Illinois. But over the years, there has been cattle blood that's been introduced through breeding, and it's just the possibility of finding truly wild bison genetics is very tantalizing. And once this whole COVID thing is over, maybe some samples will be able to be procured from these guys and we can solve that mystery. But just a really cool local tie to a very, very famous man in the realm of taxidermy and conservation. Mr. Hornaday actually went on to, when he left the Smithsonian, he was the director at the Bronx Zoo in New York. He, as I mentioned before, he was very involved in conservation. He wrote several books. One of them is this one called Our Vanishing Wildlife. And I've actually been reading that now. I don't have an actual copy, but you can access it through the National Archives online. In fact, there's a link to it. If you go to Wikipedia and look up William T. Hornaday, you can read his biography, but there's a link at the bottom that will take you to this book. The whole book is on the archive.org website. I've been reading the parts that he has about passenger pigeons, because at the time of this writing, which was 1913, this was a book. He actually distributed it to members of Congress in hopes of getting conservation laws in place that is going to protect animals from really, I guess, no other word other than slaughter. But this was published in 1913. The very last passenger pigeon died in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. She was still alive when he wrote this book. This is her right here. Her name was Martha. And you can see that now in the Cincinnati Zoological Gardens, the very last passenger pigeon. So the writing was on the wall that this species was going to be disappearing too. But it's an interesting read, very passionate in his writing and his stating of both facts and opinions about preserving wildlife. But anyway, I just wanted to give you a heads up that it's out there in cyberspace if you do want to take a look at it. You can read it for free. So now we're going to move on to, we're going to go from animals to plants. And this is one of my favorite trees in town. This is one of the enormous white oak trees that grows over at Delmar Woods Park. This is the more eastern of the two very, very large oak trees that are growing there. And I look at that and I'm like, boy, you know what? If you're an oak tree, this is how you want to grow. Clearly this tree was able to grow. I'm guessing this might have been a savanna type area. It was not woods where the trees were packed tightly together. Look at the spread. These branches come out nearly as wide as the tree is tall. It's just a really amazing example of a local white oak tree, probably between 200 and 300 years old, as near as we've been able to guess from the girth and the size of the tree. Now, are all trees this lucky? No. This tree, I walk by this tree just about every day when I walk to work. This is a bald cypress tree. This, let's see, I believe this is 5th Street here. And it's a parkway tree, so it's already going to have some issues here with its roots encountering pavement, both on the street side and on the sidewalk side. But look at what's going on here. This tree here, I think this is a silver maple that's just really kind of spreading out, and the bald cypress is doing everything it can to not get entangled with it. I like to imagine that it's thinking, hey, look out, you big tree, stay in your lane. Trees, their growth habits will sometimes tell us what conditions they're growing under. Now, sometimes trees, when they're growing in crowded areas, they'll grow very tall and thin. Their branches will reach upwards instead of outwards. Sometimes trees do this, where they just don't grow at all. Now there's different thinking for why trees do this. Some people say that it's the friction that occurs between the ends of the branches. Some say it's photoreceptors on the leaves that are interpreting instead of light, they're getting shade, and that's causing the tree to put more effort into growing away from the shady part. There's actually a phenomenon that's called crown or canopy shyness. Now, this is a picture of a rainforest in Argentina, but look at how the tips of the branches of these trees are avoiding each other. There's all kinds of books out now about and articles that have been written about how trees communicate. There's a lot of evidence pointing to the communication that goes on underneath the ground between trees that are growing in a woodland, the mycelium, the fungal communities that are around the roots are sending messages to each other and to different individual trees within a community like that. So there's lots of we tend to think of plants as well, they're plants, they don't make any noise, they don't really move very much, but really there's a lot going on. Now I want to share this next photo because I puzzle over this every week when I drive to my mom's. This is a bur oak tree. This over here on the side, this is Winfield Road and this is Manchester Road, and this is an oak tree. And I can't think of another instance where, to avoid obstructions, a tree has actually grown downward. Now, I took this picture last spring when the trees were just starting to leaf out. This growth habit isn't that obvious in the summer when the leaves are out on the trees, but I want to try and get another picture now that the tree is bare again. It's just, this is kind of a busy intersection, and I usually got dogs with me in the car. It's not the most convenient spot to stop and take a photograph, but look at the branches here. They go down. Usually, when a tree grows or a plant grows, it grows towards light, and when a plant is outside, the light is the sun that's in the sky, and it's going to be up here. And this tree has made every effort to avoid these power lines here that have been here for a very long time. And it's growing downward instead of upward. I just thought that was really interesting. And it's one of these things, Susie, I know you like the term wonders. It's a wonder, and I look at it every week, and I just wonder what it was that the tree sensed about these wires that it sent this branch out to gather sunshine and to help it grow, but it rather than twisting back towards itself, it's curved downward for many. That's a good sized branch. So anyway, just something kind of cool, something I wanted to share as we go on. Now, so you know what? I don't know why the graphic's not showing up. Actually gonna stop the share for a minute because we're gonna play show and tell. Julie Long, I have to give you credit for this. This little object showed up on my desk a couple of weeks ago. Thanks to you, Julie. And oh, fell on the floor. I want to show it to you, and I want to see if you all can guess what it is. Everybody see this? Okay. It's maybe a little flattened from being in a bag, and it's a little stiff because it's no longer alive, but it's really cool. Does anybody want to take a guess as to what this object might be? And Julie, don't say anything. Any guesses? And you can share in the chat too if you want. This is a flying squirrel tail. So this was found by Barbara Ask, who's a member of King County Audubon, and Barb gave it to Julie, and Julie brought it here to the office. Tell you, if you ever want to get a rise out of a bunch of marketing people, show up, what was it, Julie, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon with a flying squirrel tail, and yeah, just say you're leaving it for the nature girl. But anyway, it's kind of neat, and I'm definitely going to add it to my collection here. I haven't had a chance to hit it yet with the black light. That's another thing that I'll probably do just to see, because remember we looked at how the flying squirrel fluoresces under black light. So we will be keeping this as part of the collection, but also investigating if it glows in the dark or not. Now, I want to go back and go back to this graphic, which usually is what starts off our program every week. I added a little bit to it. It's the good-natured version of the Capital One commercial, "What's in your wallet?" This is called "What's in your pockets?" And I'm gonna stop the share because I was doing some cleaning the other day. I put together some things to donate. I had some winter coats that I hadn't worn in a long time. I had a few other kind of like shirt jacket things, and I thought, well, before I donate these things, I better put them in the wash, and before you put something in the wash, you gotta empty the pockets. And I just was cracking myself up. I don't know, you know, some of these things I know what I was thinking. Of course, you can't go anywhere near water and me and not pick up a shell or two. This is actually a really cool freshwater mussel shell called a spike. The spike is state endangered, Illinois state endangered species. So it was kind of ironic that I had this as well as a whole bunch of these. This is not a mussel, this is a clam. This is an Asian clam. Now the difference between mussels and clams, I know we tend to use the terms interchangeably, but they do have some differences in their life cycles. A mussel will, it needs a fish host to help its offspring grow. It produces little microscopic, their babies are called glaucidia, and they spew them out and they hook onto the gills of fish, and the glaucidia grow on the gills of the fish, and then they drop off, hopefully a great distance away from the mama mussel. That's a great way to disperse the species. Clams, such as this one here, this Asian clam, when they disperse their young, they just kind of open up and spit. And you know, if they get caught in a current and moved a little bit, great. And if they don't, well, then you end up with a whole bunch of these. So you can see this shell is pretty symmetrical, and we find these a lot in the Fox River and its tributaries. I'm gonna do this, and I apologize in advance if you can, if you can't hear it, I apologize for that too, but if you can hear that, some people describe it as nails on a chalkboard. These are heavily ridged. These are very noisy shells, whereas our freshwater mussels are pretty smooth. And they make a little bit of sound, but not a lot. These are also, as I said, they're very symmetrical. They're almost triangular in shape. The back part of the shell, this part right here, is called the beak, and it's pretty much right in the middle of the back of the shell. Our native mussels, the beak is right here, and it's always off center. Right there. So unfortunately, we find some areas with lots and lots of these. In fact, not here in King County, but over in DuPage County at the Naperville Riverwalk, there's parts of the Riverwalk where the substrate, the natural substrate of gravel and rock is completely buried in the shells of Asian clams. These live only a few years, where some of our native mussels can live decades. They have a very long life. These don't live very long, and so as a consequence, we end up with piles and piles of shells. There is evidence of animals that are recognizing them as food, though. We found that raccoons will eat them. There's certain birds, waterfowl, that will eat them too. They're just not eating quite enough of them. But anyway, I had a whole pocket full of Asian clams. I also had this, which is kind of cool. And by the way, if you find a live one, they make great pets, but they have no business in our local waterways. This is the shell of a Chinese mystery snail. They might still be sold in pet stores. I don't know if they're one of the animals that's been banned or not, but when people would bring their little goldfish bowls or their fish tanks to the river and let their fish go, a lot of times these would get let go too. And they don't really displace any organisms, but they do carry diseases that then can have an effect on our local animals. So Chinese mystery snail is not a great thing to be finding, but like if you do find them live, they're pretty easy to keep. They'll feed on romaine lettuce and there's a lot of invasive aquatic plants that you can also pull out to take home to feed your new pet. But Chinese mystery snails in our Fox River and also in my pocket. And does anybody recognize this? Got seeds inside. This is a cool shrub that we don't see a lot of around here, but I happen to walk by one on my way to work all the time. This is the fruit of a shrub called the bladder nut, or a small tree called the bladder nut. And it makes these, it's almost like a papery shell, and there's seeds inside. I don't know how this thing get crushed. It's well, it is a pretty tough skin too. I'd like to think these seeds are still viable, but knowing how long I've had that coat, I don't know if they are. I might try soaking them and seeing if anything pops out. But anyway, bladder nut in my pocket. This is going on my shelf. I've been looking for this for a while. Let me see if I can get it so that the light doesn't reflect on it. Everybody see what that is? This is the quintessential scat. Why is that blue line there? Ah, that's a pretty good angle. This is fox scat. And I'm lucky some of my coats have pretty big inner pockets. I must have had this for a hike that I was doing and felt in case we didn't run into, because so often we'll find coyote scat, but not fox scat. And I guess I wanted to make sure I had some in case we didn't find any. But anyway, inner pocket, immensely grateful that I was able to find that before this went off to Salvation Army. And then last but not least, here's a tooth. It's a molar. And the size of it to me says deer, but deer teeth, I don't know, this looks like it's very worn down, but not in the way that deer teeth wear. It's still got a lot of points to it. And deer teeth, when they wear down, you'll see ridges on the inside, kind of like the ridges you see if you can picture like a mammoth tooth. I don't know if you can picture mammoth tooth or not, but anyway, this tooth, I'm not sure if, I mean, I suppose it could be a deer, but if it's not, it would be a very large carnivore of some sort. And I don't know if anybody has any thoughts as to what animal this might have come from, but it's funny, when I put stuff like this in my pants pockets, I usually find a place for it right away because they're pokey and uncomfortable. But being in a coat pocket, they hang out there for quite some time without me remembering what they are, where they are. So anyway, Capital One has what's in your wallet. Naturalists, we have what's in our pockets. You know what? One more thing. We had done our gift suggestions for naturalists. I got to tell you, I received this as a gift last year from a coworker whose mom actually collects these things, and she doesn't just collect new ones; she collects vintage. They're called hobo knives, and I use this all the time because most naturalists are ready to eat at the drop of a hat. And for years, I'd been saving spoons and forks and things like that from plasticware from different meals that I've had. And then I would find I'd want to eat, I'd see cake or something, and I'd reach in my pocket to pull out the plasticware, and it will have broken. But this lets me eat pretty much anytime I want. And it's cool. It's a great reminder of my coworker Darby, who's actually moved on now to the Downers Grove Park District, and of her wonderful mom who collects these and gave this to me. But they do make great gifts, and I think it's eBay. That's a good source if you're looking for vintage hobo knives. And be ready to eat at the drop of a hat. I'm going to put this back in my pocket. And see, we're just about out of time. I'm going to turn it over to you. Does anybody have any questions or observations? Things that you've seen over the last week that you've been wondering about? I see we did have some guesses here on our bird identifications, cowbirds. I was thinking that too, Kathy. I was wondering, they seemed a little bit small for cowbirds. The one with the white under the wing, I didn't know what that was. And the woman did say that they were in a shadow. So the coloring looked dark, but I don't know that they were dark. And I'm bummed that the format here didn't allow me to stop the video from time to time so you could see. I know for sure there was a female house sparrow, and then there was the one bird with the clear, there were no markings on the face or the breast. I don't know. I guess I'll tell her to, put some more water out and try again. But anyway, anybody have any comments, questions, anything for the good of the group?
Hi, Pam, it's Kay.
Oh, hey, Kay.
Hi. We were at Grants Woods recently. It's in Ingleside, Lake Villa up in northern Illinois.
Okay.
And it's really cool. Obviously, all the trees were barren for the most part. There was a ton of Kentucky coffee trees, which I know you find fascinating.
I do. Yes, I do.
And then certain oaks, which I imagine they were burr. I couldn't see the leaves to tell the difference. But
Okay.
they were actually like growing down towards almost like the water that flowed through that area.
Okay. So their branches were going down too?
Right. So I don't know if that's an attraction to why they would grow down. Obviously not the one you saw by Winfield and Mansfield, but it was kind of interesting. The burrs were definitely, and it wasn't wear and tear where they were falling over. It was the branches were definitely growing down.
Growing downward. Cool. Okay. Well, that gives me something to go on too, Kay, to see if there's
coffee tree.
What instances, there would be.
Coffee beans, but unroasted pods and seeds are toxic.
I've got what's left of a Kentucky coffee pod right here. Yeah, you're right, Kay. I think these are endlessly fascinating. I first read about them in a book called The Ghosts of Evolution. Here's a larger piece of the pod, and then here's one of the seeds. Now this pod is super dry, but here's one of the seeds. It's a very large seed, and the pod itself, let's see if you can see. Can you see how that's got kind of a greenish cast to it? This
right.
sticky green material. It's got kind of a sweetness to it, but it also has a toxin to it. So these are only scavenged when other food sources are like acorns and things are nowhere to be found. But it was
Yeah, the write-up on the coffee trees, they said the American Indians was the reason that they were so prevalent there. And
Yeah.
they used to use the seeds for trading, etc.
Yeah, they made games with them too. These were games.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
And before that, it was our megafauna, Ice Age megafauna that ate these. And the tree grew these pods to attract, because again, plants always need a way to disperse their seeds. And in the days of the Ice Age, with these ginormous mammals walking around, you needed to put something out there that was pretty enticing. And what the Kentucky coffee tree had to offer. So we have a lot of them growing around here, but they weren't dispersed by mastodons. They're mostly, actually, the city public works departments will plant these a lot of times because they're very tolerant to salts. So they can be planted in parkways and not suffer the ill effects of snowplows and salting that goes on here. Yeah, they're a cool tree. And I wonder if up in those woods, I wonder why they were planted there, if they escaped.
They said that American Indians had planted them.
Oh, they can trace them back to the air. Interesting. Okay. Very cool. Anybody else? I see in the chat here, we had a couple of other thoughts, grackles and cowbirds. If anybody wants to view that video, I will be glad to send it out to you. But if not, December 22nd, Santa Claus is probably loading his sleigh up. Very soon you guys are probably getting ready to celebrate in your own ways, but I wanted to make sure I wished all of you a very, very Merry Christmas. And we'll be back here again next week on the 29th, getting ready to kick 2020 to the curb. Three different topics lined up already. We're going to be looking at one thing we weren't going to have time for this week is you might be a naturalist if, so that's a fun little bunch of sayings we have, and I'll give you a little bit more details on some crafts and hobbies that you might wish to pursue and to appease your naturalist side. Got some articles that some of you had submitted that will be exploring a little bit more on the topic of fluorescence and creatures that do that under black light. I've got some cool pictures that a reader sent in as he was cleaning out his birdhouses. So anyway, that and lots more will await us next week. In the meantime, everybody, Merry Christmas, and see you in a week.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks a lot.
Great time.
Merry Christmas.
Take
Yep.
care, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Pam.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.